this will either be the biggest success of my home cooking career or the biggest failure. We should know in about 10 hours, I would say.
Most people at this point have heard of the term barbacoa. It's kind of caught fire in the culinary world over the last 5 years, showing up in cooking shows and YouTube videos, and really breaking out of Mexico and hitting menus worldwide. But anytime a food gets very popular, naturally the techniques and methods start getting watered down. For instance, Chipotle, the biggest Mexican food chain in the world, has a barbacoa on the menu, which we will try later. Or a quick search on Google for barbacoa and you're gonna get hundreds of different recipes. But what most people don't understand is that barbacoa simply translates to barbecue in Spanish and actually represents a traditional cooking method used in Mexico for hundreds of years, where meat is buried underground in a pit and slow cooked for hours. And I've been studying every single piece of information I can get my hands on with the goal of making a traditional barbacoa experience at home. And it really all starts with a fire pit. If you take a look at some of the videos online, you can quickly get the vibes for how this process is unique in the barbecue world. You've got some sort of stone or brick or concrete lined pit in the ground where a fire is built up and then burned down for a few hours until it's just the coals. And then all of that thermal mass from the walls really hold onto that heat. So when the meat goes in, it's completely covered and sealed off, and it will slow cook for hours without actually having to maintain a fire. Now, of course, most people trying barbacoa at home do not have an in-ground fire pit. For instance, Rick Bayless in this video is making a barbacoa recipe, and he goes as far as using the maguey leaves or the agave leaves, which I'm sure is still absolutely delicious. But this video is not about slow cookers. I am trying to get as close to that authentic experience as possible, so I'm gonna need a fire pit. So I scouted out a spot in my yard, which felt pretty safe and far enough away from trees that I wouldn't hit too many roots when I actually dug the pit. And I'm gonna simply be digging a round hole that can fit the pot I'm using, plus have enough room to line the outside with bricks for the heat retention. And I'm using this ditch digger tool, which has really become one of my favorite garden tools, specifically when I need to dig a hole, because it's very efficient at doing that. It gives you the ability to dig very straight and flat walls, which is gonna help when I actually go to line these walls with bricks.
All right, I'm pretty happy with that hole right there. Say I moved a good bit of dirt. I'm just happy I didn't hit any roots or rocks. That's pretty clean. So I'm just gonna kind of flatten this bottom. Pot fits in here, no problem. And then I'm gonna go grab some bricks and we'll build out this pit. So right here, it might not look like it, but under all of this overgrown ivy, there's a ton of bricks here. And I've been wanting to use these up since I moved in. So now is the time to at least make a dent.
So I gather up a bunch of bricks, which are gonna add the side wall structure plus all of that heat retention that I'm gonna need. But I'm not actually gonna lay any concrete and make anything permanent. If this works really well, maybe I'll think about something permanent, but for now, you'll just have to stay tuned and find out. And I just went around in a circular pattern with the bricks, trying to create the best walls that I could. And then at the end, I filled in the bottom with bricks and then filled in some of those holes in the bottom with the dirt I dug out to create a nice flat bottom, and then put some dirt around the edges just to reinforce those top walls.
All right, we got a fire pit. It took me about an hour, which isn't bad. And it came out better than I expected. For something non-permanent that's just thrown together. So I will build up the fire, let it burn down. Pan goes in there, cover it with something, which I have to figure out. And then we use this sandy soil to cover up all the gaps, so everything is contained. So traditional barbacoa pit, check. Next thing I'm gonna do is work on marinating the lamb.
All right, so let's talk about the meat that we're gonna be using. And again, barbacoa is a cooking method. It's not a singular recipe. You're gonna see it all over Mexico, and depending on the region, there's gonna be different flavors used. There's gonna be different types of meat. And generally, barbacoa is gonna be a celebration type meal because it's not easy to do. It takes a long time, so a lot is made at once. We're talking full animals broken down and cooked in a pit. Now, the type of meat that has become, I would say, most synonymous with barbacoa is lamb, partially due to Christina Martinez of South Philly Barbacoa, who has absolutely blown up. She was featured on Chef's Table, and she is actually from what they say is the birthplace of barbacoa in Mexico, a town called Capulac outside of Mexico City, where lamb and goat are the traditional meats used. And I absolutely love lamb, so that was always gonna be the choice for my first attempt at traditional barbacoa. Now, I am not cooking for a massive party, so it doesn't make sense for me to do a full lamb, nor is that an easy thing to get. So I'm recreating it on a much more attainable scale at home by getting the cuts of lamb that are best optimized for slow cooking. So I've got a shoulder of lamb right here, which should just melt apart. We've got 2 shanks, same thing, super tough cut that will break down over time. Now I have a leg of lamb, which generally is a roasting cut. It's a little more delicate, but I'm super interested in seeing what happens when you throw it in the pit, considering in a traditional setting, everything is thrown in there. And then over here, I ordered a bunch of lamb bones, which I don't expect to get much meat from these at all, but an important aspect of barbacoa is the consommé or the broth you get at the bottom of the pan, and we should be able to extract a lot of flavor out of these bones. Now from my research, most traditional places keep the marination stage extremely simple. Generally just salt is used, so you really get that flavor from the smoke of the fire, plus those aromatic leaves that you wrap the meat in. But I did see Christina Martinez use the addition of orange juice, I believe, to soften or tenderize the meat. So I'm gonna follow her lead by just salting all of the meat, a nice even coating, and then I'll just hit it with that orange juice. Now here is my pot, and I've got this rack, which has about a 2-inch spacing where the consommé can develop at the bottom and steam all of the meat. Now I'm gonna start off with some water so things don't burn. We get that steam right away. And this is where our additional spice will go. I'm gonna keep it pretty simple. Coriander seeds, cumin seeds, some oregano, and then some Mexican dried peppers. We've got ancho, guajillo, and these are some homemade chipotles from my short video. So I'll just de-seed these and pop them in. I'll place the rack right on there. Now, traditionally you have a maguey leaf or an agave leaf that is roasted on the fire. Then you would wrap the meat in the leaf. And I searched the entire internet, and it is impossible to order those leaves. You either have to live near a Mexican market that sells them or live in Mexico. Neither of those were an option for me, so I went with the second best thing, which is banana leaves, which I could find online. So I'm gonna open these up, just line the pan that way, that way, that way. These really smell good. Okay, lined. Stack on all of those bones. And then our lamb meat. Wow. And then we'll wrap the top. Done. Let's see if this fire pit works. All right, so it seems like a very successful fire pit. Like that thing is ripping. So this will burn down for the next hour or so. Then I can put in that beautiful pot of goodness. And in the meantime, I can prepare some toppings. All right, before we get into all those toppings, I wanted to quickly tell you about today's sponsor, which is Teifer. Now, I've been using their InstaProbe thermometer for a while now, which I love. It's got the full OLED screen, and the temperature reading flips depending on the orientation of the thermometer, so you don't have to worry about flipping it over while you're getting a reading. And the accuracy on this thing is super refined and tuned in with a half-second accuracy time. But recently, I got a new addition to my home cooking tool set with the Teifer Sync, which is their brand new wireless thermometer, which has 2 wireless probes that charge directly within the device and immediately connect with Bluetooth 5.4, giving it the most reliable connectivity. And it's not just one sensor getting one reading. Each probe has 5 sensors built right into them, so you get a super accurate reading of the lowest temperature of your food. And one thing I really like about this wireless thermometer is that it not only allows you to monitor right from the device base, but you also have the ability to connect to Wi-Fi through your phone for unlimited range. And if you want to get really technical, you've got real-time temp monitoring right in the app. So if you're interested in the InstaProbe and the Teifer Sync, click the link below in the description and use code word ProHomeCooks for 20% off your first order. And now back to some barbacoa. Now we're gonna have all of this delicious lamb, which of course is gonna be turned into tacos. And every taco needs a delicious salsa. And from what I've seen, there isn't one like holy salsa that is perfect with barbacoa. So I'm just gonna make the one that makes the most sense for me, which is what I have in season right now. And luckily in the garden, Hayden, I have the perfect ingredients for a great roasted salsa verde. The tomatillo season ended about 2 weeks ago, so I just picked all of these and kept them in the fridge. And I'll also get some jalapenos, green onion that I have growing, and a little bit of cilantro. Now I took out most of the seeds in the jalapenos because these homegrown ones are deadly, just leaving a few behind, which would be plenty of spice. And I'll take out a baking sheet, add some oil, and pop on the jalapenos, the tomatillos, and those green onions, and just roast that at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. And while that's roasting, I'm gonna soak a few of these dried chipotles from my homemade chipotle video. These are just smoked and dried jalapenos. And we'll add another layer of smoky flavor. And when that veg just looks beautifully roasted, I'll add it to a food processor along with 2 cloves of fresh garlic, my rehydrated chipotles along with the liquid in there, some lime juice, a little bit of cilantro, and finally salt to season. And then I'll pulse this up, adding that chipotle liquid in there just until that consistency is perfect. And from my experience of being in Mexico, most taco vendors serve tacos very simply with just the meat, a salsa or two, and then some fresh cut up onion, which I like, but to me, you can't beat these things right here. The pickled onions, just to add that acidity and a little bit more flavor. So I had some red onions left from my garden harvest video, and I pickled them up by just slicing them up, throwing them in a jar, filling it halfway with vinegar, and the other half with water, pouring that in a pot, adding a little bit of salt and sugar, giving that a boil, and then pouring it back over the onions. Boom. Beautiful pickled onions ready to go. And then finally, it would be a bit of a tragedy if I went through all of this effort to make barbacoa and didn't make homemade tortillas. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. And I've just got a few different types of masa here that I'm gonna combine. And I'm adding a little bit of bacon fat to this, and then I'll slowly pour in warm water and bring this dough together until it almost forms like a Play-Doh texture. Shouldn't be too dry, it shouldn't be too wet, it should have a nice pliable feel. And I'll let that sit for about 30 minutes, and then I'll start pressing some corn tortillas, getting them ready for our ultimate barbacoa experience. All right, so about an hour and a half later, all those coals have burnt down, pretty much. So one thing I'm gonna do before this goes in, I'm gonna take one of these wireless probes and just slip it right in there. Cover that back up. And I'm sure at some point it will run out of battery, but it will be pretty interesting to monitor the temperature as the lamb heats up in here. All right, I'm about to go where not many home cooks have ever gone outside of Mexico, and I have no idea what's gonna happen. Now, unfortunately, I don't have anything metal that will fit at least over top. So I'm using a piece of wood. Hopefully this thing doesn't burn down. And then the key is to dig it in with all of that dirt to make sure all of the heat, all of the smoke stays in there and is insulated. Look at this, smoke already billowing out of these holes. That's pretty cool. Wow, that is gonna be some smoky goodness inside of there. All right, I don't see any smoke coming out of any pockets here. Temperature probe still reading. Hasn't changed temperature though. And now we wait. It's about 4 p.m. now, and I'll check it in the morning and we'll see what's up. Oh, we've risen 1 degree. That's a good sign. All right, this is my last update before tomorrow morning. We are quickly rising. This is my only form of communication. Kind of weird, actually. I've never felt so disconnected to a cooking process. No contact at all. It's not even hot. So we pray and we wake up tomorrow. Hopefully everything will be all right. All right, so we've arrived on site next day. It's actually 18 hours later. Last night I did come by and check, and the whole pile was just slowly giving off smoke. It did rain last night. Hopefully that's not an issue. So I'm gonna dig this all up and see what's inside. The wood didn't burn down. That's a good sign. Here we go. Whoa. Is it still warm is the question. It's slightly warm, but I can definitely handle this. All right, so the good sign is I hear liquid in the bottom. I was very scared that it would totally dehydrate in there. These smell so smoky. Oh my God. Oh, I see meat coming off a bone. We got our thermometer. This was one of my concerns, which is all right. It looks like we didn't get enough heat in there. Oh, we're close. We're close. That tastes incredible. As you can see, this is the pork shoulder. It's not fully tearing apart. The aromas are there, and you can see like these bones are pretty clean, but it needed more heat. And that was one of my concerns when I put the pot in. I felt like I could have doubled the amount of wood I put in there and burn those coals down for longer, which is a bummer because it didn't need that much more cooking time. But what I'm gonna do is really simple. I'm just gonna put this in the oven since we've already built all the flavor, and just slow cook it for another, say, 2 hours until it falls apart. I'll put a lid on this thing to trap in all the steam. We already got the smokiness in there, and just get it to perfect tenderness. Wow.
Woo! So hot, but just pulls right apart.
Look at that, so juicy. Still some nice texture. Here's the lamb shank.
It's a little bit tougher. That probably could have gone a little longer, but still coming off the bone pretty good.
So traditionally you see chickpeas thrown in the consomme, and they'll just have this served as a soup, which totally makes sense. After trying it, oh, that's got a nice kick. That is some of the most incredible broth I've ever tasted. It's extremely simple, but complex at the same time. From subtle aromatic hits of the spices meets the smokiness. I think what I would wanna do is reduce that and then just throw all of the meat in there for extra flavor. But we're gonna try this taco. Barbacoa, here we go. Wow. It's not fully what I expected, but I love it.
And I'll tell you why, but I need something to show you first.
This is a barbacoa taco from Chipotle that I ordered. This is what an American palate is used to when it comes to Mexican food at this point. First of all, it's beef. They're not serving lamb at Chipotle. And it's really tasty. It's very flavorful. It's pulled meat, super tender, but it's a more classic slow braised cut. It's loaded with flavors, whereas this is much more refined. The lamb is celebrated in a way that I'm not used to. I need another taco. Oh my God. This is the leg of lamb. I will say, if you're doing it at home, it's actually decently tender, but I would stick to those tougher cuts like the shoulder or the shank when you're doing it on a smaller scale. I feel like I did a good job at recreating what I would imagine the flavor would taste like. I've never had traditional barbacoa in Mexico, but I did my best. So overall, it's very clear that the pitmasters that have been making barbecue in this traditional method are spending so much time, in some cases their entire lives, mastering these techniques. And overall, on my first attempt, I was clearly off on a few key details, like not loading up the pit with enough wood to create more coals so I could get a longer cooking time. And it's really a testament that the more traditional and primitive cooking methods and techniques from hundreds or sometimes thousands of years ago take just as much skill to master as more modern techniques. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to check out Typher products by using the link below.